Hi, my name is Greg Oliver. I'm a first responder here on mygracejourney.com, and I've been involved with Route 1520 for about 4 years now. For almost 15 years, I also served as music and worship pastor in a couple of different local churches. All at the same time that was going on, however, I was also struggling with my own secret struggle and shame and sin and sexual addiction. Really, even before I went to Bible college, before I got involved in full-time ministry, I was struggling with a problem with pornography that developed and just ascended over the years into a much greater problem. For me, the issue was that it was something I felt like I had to try to deal with on my own. Couldn't bring anybody into the struggle with me because I was afraid of rejection, afraid of losing my job or my family. And so because of that, the problem just escalated. In January of 2009, God just exposed everything, brought it all into the open. Certainly there were a lot of consequences, but God has been very faithful, and I've been walking a path of recovery for the last 4.5 years. And my purpose in this video is to talk to you about one aspect of my recovery that has just been critical, and that is the aspect of involving therapy. A lot of people understand the importance of accountability or of going to a group where you can get support. But one of the things in my experience that I've noticed a lot of men and women neglecting in their own journey is to involve a licensed professional therapist in their recovery process. So I just want to take a few minutes to talk to you from my perspective about why that's so critical. Getting a little bit inside my own head and where I was during those years of struggling with my addiction and with my sin, there's a lot of deceit that's flying around. There's a lot of deceptive things that are being spoken, that were being spoken into my heart and into my mind because I wasn't surrounding myself with people who really knew me, who could talk about the gospel with me, who could speak the truth to me. And so really the only thing that I was leaving myself open to was the deceptive words of my own inner critic, my own addiction, and my spiritual enemy. And so over time, that deception really merged with my own self-deception. And I began to diagnose myself, to evaluate what was going on. There were a lot of instances in thinking, well, I can handle this. If I just do this, it won't be so bad, or it'll be containable, it'll be controllable. Lots of things that none of them were true, but I made a very good argument to myself. And so I became really good at deceiving myself and just staying locked in that place of isolation. Well, after everything broke and I was just in a crater, didn't know what was going to happen, didn't know if I was going to lose my family, didn't know what life was going to look like, one of the first things that I was able to become involved with was individual therapy, and also therapy that I went to with my wife. And my therapist was a CSAT, a Certified Sex Addiction Therapist, and it was a godsend. That experience of working with her, there's a number of reasons why I don't believe that I'd be where I am 4.5 years down the road without having had that as a part of my experience. So I'll just kind of unfold those one at a time. First of all, it gives you a context in which you can be completely honest. I was used to dishonesty. I was used to keeping track of all of the lies because I didn't believe that the people in my life were going to be able to handle the truth, or I didn't know how they would respond to me if I told them the truth. But I did have a general underlying belief that a counselor would be someone who's probably heard it all, and I don't already have a relationship with this person. I feel like I could just go ahead and open up and say everything without fear of rejection. That's kind of what I'm paying for, you know, is a safe place where I can just sort of get everything out on the table. By the time I showed up at my first appointment, one of the biggest things I wanted to know is, why am I like this? Why have I struggled with this all these years? And what is it that's going on that I haven't been able to figure out? Because for years I've been trying to self-diagnose. I've been trying to figure out what my problem is. And in order to really start unpacking those things, I had to have a context in which I could be completely truthful. And so that was one thing that was really important. Another aspect is having someone that I can just kind of throw everything out onto the table and not have to figure out what it all means. I mentioned self-diagnosis. Once I got over that first hurdle of having a commitment to approaching this thing with honesty and transparency, I had to accept that I haven't been able to figure out what's going on. And there's got to be more to this than what I see on the surface. And so that was important to go to a place and to a person that I could just talk and just not worry about, well, you know, if I say it like this, are they going to understand? What's it going to mean? Just unfiltered, just letting it all out there. My first therapy sessions, it was just me telling my story. And it was just going back as far as I could and not worrying about, you know, now what about this detail? Is she going to understand this? Is this going to make sense? But just getting it out there. And she was very effective at just saying, you just talk, you know, and don't worry about, you know, about figuring out or about me figuring out. You just tell your story. And so that was really, it was pretty freeing actually to be able to just tell the story and not try to concern myself with what is she going to think, because up to that point, anything that I was sharing, I had to be careful and guarded about how I shared it because I was keeping a secret. And if I say it this way, then is that going to betray something over here that I'm not wanting them to know about? So just to have the freedom to do it in an unfiltered way was really important. And to not try to be the one to figure out, okay, when I'm telling this story from my childhood, do I need to find the link between this thing that happened when I was 11 years old and this thing that happened when I was 35 years old? That's not my job. My job is just to put the story out there and to listen and to be open. So transparency, getting the story out there. And I'll tell you, another thing that was really, that I think God used a lot in my experience with therapy was helping my brain to just relax. Because when I would share something, I would, many times in therapy, I would realize I'm trying to word this in a way that's going to present myself in the best light. And I just had such a performance mentality which fed into my addiction for many years, especially because I was in a vocational ministry where I was literally, not just figuratively, but literally up on a stage every week with lights on me, with 1,000 people looking at me and listening to what I had to say. And so there was a bit of a rush in that, but there was also a lot of pressure to say the right things, to look the right way, to not do anything wrong. And I found that same temptation and tendency going on early in my therapy. And I realized, and she helped me to see, that the things that I said and the way that I presented myself, I was always under the lights and always on a stage and never free to just be who I was. And so that was really very liberating, very freeing to just be able to say something that, wait a second, that's risking making me look really bad. But it wasn't about that. It was about just getting to that point in discovery. You know, we use the analogy on My Grace Journey a lot, or I guess the imagery of a tree. And the branches of the trees are all of our behaviors that are negative, that are hurtful, that are coming out of our addiction, that we're trying to chop off those branches and stop that behavior. But we realize when we really look at the fact of, wait, this is a tree, the branches aren't the source, the branches are coming from the deep roots. And that's what therapy has helped me to do, and that's what therapy helps anyone in this kind of struggle to do, and that is to get down and identify what those roots are. You can't kill a tree just by chopping branches off. It has to be uprooted, and those roots oftentimes go extremely deep. They go back many years, and it takes a lot of time not only to identify them, but to make those connections between what those experiences were and how they connect with my behavior and my experiences and my acting out now. And you can't do that by yourself. You really need someone who is trained to hear certain things. And I'm stepping to the side just a second to say that a lot of times in recovery we say that everybody's story is the same. It's just the details that differ. And counselors and licensed therapists are able to hear those commonalities, and they'll hear things that we share and they'll like, I understand what that means, because they're trained to do that, and their experience has taught them to be perceptive to those types of things, where we're not able to perceive that on our own. So in all of those experiences, I was able to see that there were traumas, some of my own making, some through the contributions of other people in my life. There were fears, there were desires, there were all different types of motivations in my life that fed into what became the manifestation of my acting out. And having identified some of those things, the pressure of what does this mean about me? What does this say about me? Really began to melt away, because many times she would say, it doesn't say anything about you. It just says that this is what happened to you. You didn't know how to deal with it. You didn't know how to handle it. You tried to do it on your own. And now we see how unsuccessful that was and unfruitful that was. We needed people to be walking with us through life and through our struggles and through our journeys. And so, that's just a really kind of a quick overview coming from my experience of why therapy is important. But one of the things that I want to really make a key point on here is that of all the components of accountability, of support community, therapy is the most often neglected. A lot of people, it's a big admission to say, well, I need therapy. And there's pride going on, there's fear, there's hurt, there's anger, there's all types of emotions that we don't know how to process. And the easiest thing to do as it relates to therapy is to say, well, I don't need that, or my problem's not that severe, or if I went, then people are going to really think I'm colossally screwed up, or I can't afford it, or it's inconvenient, or I don't have the time. There's 10,000 reasons not to do it, but it's critical. I'm not saying that God can't produce recovery and progress in the life of someone who does not incorporate therapy, but I'm saying that it's a tougher road. You think of imagery of a cord of 3 strands, not being easily broken. Well, you can kind of introduce that imagery here. And therapy, along with accountability and support community, all 3 of those things introduce different strengths and different supports and different helps for us as we're going through it. Accountability is somebody who's going to challenge us, sponsorship, that kind of a relationship, people who can kind of call us out when we're slinking back into our old lies or our old belief systems, who can have that relationship with us where we trust them to really speak the truth that sometimes is hard for us to hear. Well, support community is important because that's a place where we can go and experience putting all the worst of us out there, and people who say, I love you anyway. I'm not here to fix you. I'm just here to listen and to be a support and to remind you that the gospel is true. And counseling and or therapy, that's a place where someone who is trained and qualified to know what's behind all this stuff can really be a cohesive factor in fusing all those things together. For someone who is a Christian, there might be an aversion to therapy because of what maybe they've been indoctrinated with through their religious heritage growing up. Maybe you've been told, well, a real Christian doesn't need to go to therapy. All you need is to read your Bible and pray more. And that just feeds our guilt and shame. The right therapist is going to be able to help you to filter and to distill all of the things that are going on spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, and really help us get to the bottom of what's going on. To me, it was an absolutely irreplaceable component of my recovery. And I would really strongly encourage, I would challenge you, if you are coming up with all these reasons why it wouldn't work for you or why you don't need it, to take a step back and to rethink that. You don't have to commit to a year. You don't have to commit to going every week indefinitely. Just make that first appointment. Find if in your area there is a CSAT, a certified sex addiction therapist, make an appointment and say, I'm not even sure if I need it, if that's what you're feeling. And that's okay. It's a good place to be honest. And just give it a shot. Give it a chance. Pray your way through it and ask that God would show you if this is something that He wants to be a component of your journey. I can't overstate the benefit that it's been for me, and I believe that it would be for you. So thanks for taking a few minutes to just listen through this. I hope that it makes sense. I know that you may just be at the very beginning stages. that is prime time to be incorporating counseling into your journey. And I think that you'll really find that it can serve as an encouragement to you and to the people who are walking this journey with you. So thanks.